Today we're going to talk about something that's, well, it's incredibly dangerous. But it's not a weapon, it's not a poison, it's an idea, a way of thinking. We're going to dive into the architecture of belief systems that are built to be unbreakable. And we're going to see why sometimes the most dangerous thing in the entire world is being absolutely certain that you are right.
So let's go back in time. Picture this, Vienna in the 1840s. Our story starts in a place that should be all about joy and new life, the maternity wards of the Vienna General Hospital. But something was terribly wrong. It was also a place of this deep, terrifying mystery. See, while lots of women were giving birth to healthy babies, a truly alarming number were dying just a little while later from this horrible illness they called childbed fever. And nobody, absolutely nobody, knew why.
Now here's where the tragedy gets even more specific and kind of wild. Somebody noticed a pattern. The hospital had two different wards. One was staffed by midwives, and the other was run by doctors and their medical students. And get this, the women in the doctor's ward were dying at a rate nearly 10 times higher than the women in the midwives' ward. 10 times! I mean, what on earth could explain that?
Well, along comes this Hungarian doctor named Ignaz Semmelweis, and he has an idea. He notices something that doctors do that the midwives don't. They often come straight from performing autopsies in the morgue right into the maternity ward to deliver babies. He came up with this hypothesis that they were carrying what he called cadaverous particles on their unwashed hands. His solution? It was radical for its time, but so simple. Make everyone wash their hands with chlorinated lime. And you know what? The results were immediate. The death rate just plummeted.
So, you'd think Semmelweis would be celebrated as a hero, right? I mean, he's saving lives. But no. The medical establishment completely rejected him. They actually mocked his ideas. As one writer put it so perfectly, it wasn't ignorance that was killing those women. It was the doctor's certainty. These were brilliant, educated men, but their deeply held theories about disease just couldn't make room for this simple physical evidence. Their certainty was like a fortress, and it killed thousands of women. Semmelweis himself was ruined by it all and ended up dying in a mental institution.
The tragic story of Semmelweis, it raises this fundamental question for every single one of us. What is the real difference between having a strong, healthy conviction about something and being trapped inside a deadly dogma? How do we tell them apart in our own thinking?
Well, here's the core distinction. A conviction, no matter how strong it is really a working hypothesis. It's accountable to reality. It basically says, look, based on all the evidence I've seen, this is what I believe, but I'm totally open to being proven wrong. Dogma, on the other hand, that's the fortress. It's built to be insulated from correction. It says, this is the truth, with a capital T, and any evidence that contradicts it has to be wrong. Or maybe it's a trick, or it's an attack. You see the difference? With dogma, the belief is no longer accountable to the world has to be accountable to the belief.
So, to really get why smart people, like those doctors in Vienna, fall into this trap, we've got to look at the psychology of how we form beliefs in the first place. And it turns out it's a surprisingly natural, even understandable process.
So, here's how it often works. It starts when some kind of framework, could be political, scientific, religious, whatever, gives us this really powerful explanation for the world. It makes sense of things. So we invest in it. We spend our time, our energy, we join communities built all around it. And then, over time, this really critical shift starts to happen. The belief stops being something we have, and it becomes a part of who we are. And once that happens, any evidence against the belief, well, it doesn't just feel like a disagreement. It feels like a personal attack, a threat to our very identity.
And this is precisely why changing our minds can be so incredibly difficult, right? When a belief gets fused with your identity, letting go of it isn't just a simple intellectual update. It's not like swapping out a piece of software. It can feel like you're betraying yourself. You're betraying your community, everything you've built your life on. It's literally like performing surgery on your own sense of self.
Okay, so let's zoom out a little. When you take this individual psychology and you scale it up, you get entire systems, political movements, scientific fields, even corporate cultures that are structurally immune to being corrected. They develop these powerful, built-in defense mechanisms.
And the key concept here, the thing that really helps us understand this, was laid out by the philosopher Karl Popper. He called it falsifiability. It sounds complicated, but the idea is actually pretty simple. For a theory to be meaningful, it has to be vulnerable. There has to be some kind of experiment or observation you could imagine that would prove it wrong. Because think about it. If a theory can explain everything and anything that happens, well, then it doesn't really explain anything at all.
The classic example to make this super clear is Einstein versus Freud. Einstein's theory of relativity made these really specific, really risky predictions. Like he said that starlight would actually bend around the sun during an eclipse. If astronomers had looked and that hadn't happened, boom, his theory would have been falsified. In contrast, Popper pointed out that theories like Freudian psychoanalysis were so flexible they could explain a man's behavior and its complete opposite. There was just no way to prove them wrong, which meant they were totally insulated from reality.
And look, this isn't just some abstract philosophical game. This stuff has catastrophic, real-world consequences. I mean, take the Soviet Union. An agronomist named Trofim Lysenko completely rejected mainstream genetics because he decided it didn't fit with communist ideology. His state-sponsored theories were forced on the entire country, and it led to decades of failed crops and absolutely devastating famines. Millions of people died, all because they were victims of a system that had made itself immune to scientific truth.
So how do these systems protect themselves? Well, they develop what the philosopher Imre Lakatos called a protective belt. There are a few key moves. First, there's dismissal. Anyone who disagrees is just labeled as unqualified, or maybe they're an enemy, or they're acting in bad faith. Then comes redefinition. When the theory clearly fails a test, they just say, oh, well, that wasn't the real theory anyway. And finally, you get the most powerful defense of all, reversal. This is where the failure is somehow twisted into proof. You know, like a doomsday cult whose prophecy fails and they say, see, our incredible faith saved the world. The failure actually ends up making the belief even stronger. It's wild.
Okay, so given how easy it is to fall into these traps, what do we do about it? How do we actually build minds, and for that matter, build systems that can learn from their mistakes and correct themselves?
The antidote is a concept called fallibilism. And this is so important. This does not mean you can't have strong beliefs. It doesn't mean being wishy-washy or uncertain about everything. What it means is preserving the mechanism for revision. It means you can act with total conviction, but you must always leave the door open for evidence to prove you wrong. Your beliefs have to remain, in principle, challengeable.
The source material we're drawing from has this powerful metaphor for this idea. A dogmatic mind is brittle. When it hits the hard surface of reality, it doesn't bend, it shatters. But a fallible, correctable mind, it's supple. It can encounter new evidence, bend its understanding to fit, and then continue moving forward, stronger and more in line with the truth than it was before.
So really, at the end of the day, wisdom isn't about being right all the time. I mean, no person, no system ever is. True wisdom, whether we're talking about science or democracy or just our own personal lives, it lies in having a built-in process for figuring out when we're wrong and a mechanism for correcting our course. That's the secret sauce. That's what ensures long-term success. So I want to leave you with this one thing. The single most important question you can possibly ask yourself. The one question that acts as the ultimate self-correction mechanism. And it's this. Not as a joke, not as a trick, but as a serious, disciplined habit of mind. Asking yourself, what would it look like if I were wrong? That's not a sign of weakness. It's the ultimate expression of confidence. Not in yourself, but in the search for truth itself.